The United States of America has once again launched a massive strike against Iran, this time destroying a strategic bridge connecting Iran with Russia and China. And such a target was not chosen by accident. Right now, the US is urgently transferring tanker aircraft to the Middle East and is also discussing relocating US military bases from Bahrain and Kuwait to one of the deserts in Israel. Against this backdrop, there have been reports that the team of US President Donald Trump is considering the scenario of a prolonged military campaign against Iran. According to preliminary data, it could last up to 30 days and involves the US gaining full control over the Hormuz Strait, as well as forcing Iran into a nuclear deal. Donald Trump himself, meanwhile, is sending mixed signals. On one hand, he warned Iran that the strikes would intensify significantly if Tehran attacks more ships in the Hormuz Strait. On the other hand, today he also stated that Iran has asked him to return to negotiations, so he will consider whether it is worth continuing the dialogue. But actions speak louder than words. Meanwhile, in Tehran today, the farewell ceremony for the slain Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei is coming to an end, and a split has emerged within the ranks of the Iranian regime. Because the military is very dissatisfied with President Pezeshkian, who agreed to negotiations with the United States of America. And overall, in Tehran, they believe that they failed to get the most out of the Memorandum of Understanding, and instead, the US deceived them and pulled off a certain scheme, which we will discuss with you in this episode. My name is Alexei Pechi. Let's discuss this topic together. But before we start, I ask you to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and leave any comment under this video. You don't have to do it right now. You can do it after you finish watching the episode. The main thing is, don't forget to do it. So, the United States of America and Iran have once again exchanged blows. Let's start with that. Who fired where? And as reported by the US Central Command, the latest salvo by American forces struck more than 90 targets across Iran. Iranian media report explosions and strikes in cities on Iran's southern coast, as well as, very importantly, in the northern province of Golestan on the Caspian Sea. Explosions were heard in Chabahar, a port city on the northern coast of Oman. In Iran Shar, which is a city in the southeast of Iran, the airport there was attacked. Explosions were also heard in Bushehr, Sirik, Jask, Kanarak, Bandar Abbas, as well as on Abu Musa Island in the Persian Gulf. But probably the most important and most significant target tonight was the bridge in the city of Akala, located in the northern Iranian province of Golestan in the north of Iran. And the whole point is that the bridge is part of a transportation route connecting Iran with its strategic partners, Russia and China. The railway that runs across this bridge continues through Turkmenistan and Kazakhstan and serves as an important land trade corridor between Iran and China. Its strategic importance increased after the blockade of Iranian ports in the Persian Gulf imposed by the US this year. In addition, since the end of 2020, this same route has been used by Russia to deliver cargo to Iran. So, last night the US struck at the logistics that Russia and China used to supply the Iranian regime, and this, as you can imagine, says a lot. On the other hand, the Iranians paid attention to the attack on other bridges, not this particular one. And in general, for the Iranians, the strike on the bridges today had a slightly different meaning. Iran accused the United States of committing an outrageous war crime after strikes on two more bridges, this time in the east of Iran. The Iranian Ministry of Foreign Affairs reported that the American military struck two bridges in the eastern provinces on the railway route to Mashhad. As you can see, they are targeting railway logistics. The key point is that Ali Khamenei's body was delivered today specifically to Mashhad, his hometown. And the Iranians considered this a moral blow, saying that the Americans wanted to disrupt the funeral of their supreme leader, Ali Khamenei. And that's exactly why they struck those bridges, so that the body of the deceased elder could not be delivered to his hometown, where his funeral is taking place today. In response to the US attacks, Iran began firing at its neighbors. Bahrain's air defense systems intercepted and destroyed several Iranian aerial threats. Earlier, Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps stated that in response to the latest wave of American strikes, it launched attacks on American military bases in Kuwait and Bahrain. This was to be expected. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps stated that its targets were the Sheikh Issa Air Base in Bahrain and the Jufair area, where the U.S. Navy base is located. This is the main base of the U.S. Navy in the Persian Gulf, where the legendary Fifth Fleet is stationed. At the same time, the Iranian army announced the launch of strike drones targeting a satellite antenna in Qatar. By the way, this is the first acknowledgement that Iran is attacking Qatar specifically. Previously, let me remind you, the regime in Iran always played dumb and claimed that it had never attacked Qatar. They always claimed the attacks weren't theirs, blaming Americans launching from Hungary or Israelis. This is the first time they've admitted striking Qatar. In Qatar, by the way, all the missiles were intercepted, nothing was hit, but nevertheless, this is a very telling moment. And here it's worth clarifying something so that you have a clear understanding and the whole picture comes together. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps operates independently from the rest of Iran's armed forces and has its own army, navy, and air force. Intelligence services, special forces units, financial sectors, and so on. Its role is to preserve the Islamic Republic, and it reports directly to the supreme leader. That's why strikes by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps and strikes by the Iranian army are two different things. This is something we need to understand and keep in mind because we'll come back to it later. The IRGC essentially dictates its own terms and fights the way it wants. But today, the Iranian army has also joined the war. And against this backdrop, there was a report that internal disagreements within Iran's political leadership have escalated into open confrontation amid the renewed hostilities between Tehran and Washington. During the morning events dedicated to the memory of the late Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, the country's president Masoud Pezeshkian and the head of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs Abbas Araghchi came under attack. Aggression from supporters of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, who are categorically opposed to any diplomatic contacts with the Donald Trump administration. They have already offered some kind of reward for killing Trump and are now pushing this agenda. In particular, during the farewell to Khamenei, those same supporters of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps today attacked both President Pezeshkian and Minister Araghchi. A scuffle broke out and security had to remove the officials. In general, it's quite a scene, but I won't show it here on YouTube because, unfortunately, YouTube for some reason starts blocking these clips when I use any videos about events in Iran, inside Iran. So if you're interested, you can find it on my Telegram channel, for example. And right now, sources in Iranian government circles describe the current situation in Tehran as a state of complete chaos, where various opposing political forces are engaged in a fierce struggle to determine the future course. From continuing diplomatic dialogue to moving toward a full-scale military confrontation. Later in the afternoon on July 9, the Iranian news agency Fars reported that residents of the city of Chagadak in Bushehr province heard the sounds of several explosions. And in Chagadak, there is a base of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, which was struck at the very beginning of this war on February 28th. Well, on Wednesday, Iranian officials reported a strike on a military facility in the same area. So it's quite obvious that the Americans are continuing their attacks this afternoon on July 9th. At the same time, air raid sirens sounded in Jordan after Iranian missiles violated the country's airspace. Representatives of the Jordanian government stated that all the missiles were intercepted and neutralized. Well, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps said that it wasn't 10 ballistic missiles they fired at Jordan. So, as of now, Iran has attacked 4 countries today: Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, and Jordan. Against this backdrop, Iran is hastily withdrawing its tankers from the Strait of Hormuz. The intensification of attacks in the Persian Gulf over the past 2 days and President Donald Trump's threat to reimpose a US-led naval blockade are prompting Iran to withdraw its oil tankers from the Strait of Hormuz as quickly as possible, simply to preserve them. But not just that, not only to preserve them, but also to make some money at the last moment. Over the past night, while the Americans were bombing Iran, Iran shipped 10 million barrels of oil and fuel. As you can imagine, this is a significant increase. Why? Because according to World Intelligence, by Thursday, Iran managed to ship in total a total of 60 million barrels of oil and petroleum products over the past 3 weeks. And here they loaded 10 million in just one night. And now these loaded tankers are rushing at full speed out of the Hormuz Strait. At the same time, Trump started playing his old tune again, saying that the US has already won and that Iran is once again asking him to resume negotiations. At the same time, the US president emphasized that he still doesn't know whether Iran deserves to make a deal. Here's the quote. "We have many ways to win, but we have already won militarily. They have very little left. They have almost nothing left, and they want to make a deal so badly. They called just recently. They really want to make a deal. I just don't know if they deserve to make such a deal. I don't know if they will stick to this deal. That's the problem. If they want to make a deal, then why do you think they attacked commercial ships? Because, to be honest, it sounded crazy. It sounded crazy. They got a little out of control, but they really want to make a deal. But in reality, it doesn't really look like Iran is asking to make a deal, or that Trump actually intended to make peace. Axios reports that the White House is preparing for what could turn into a multi-day or even multi-week exchange of strikes with Iran. The duration and scale of the new campaign will depend entirely on Tehran's further actions. American officials reported this, but added that the likely new phase of the war will indeed take place, and it will be quite prolonged. As Axios reports, the war that started to weaken Iran's missile capabilities and destroy its nuclear program remnants has become a prolonged fight over the vital energy hub, the Hormuz Strait. It began with one goal, but shifted to focus on energy issues. The Hormuz Strait, in fact, the situation developed in such a way that it started with one thing and ended with something else, and that's how it is. An American official stated that the current escalation could last a day, 2 days, a week, or a month, depending on whether Iran continues attacks on commercial ships in the Hormuz Strait or not. Diplomatic negotiations have reached a deadlock for now, and military pressure has once again become a central element of President Trump's strategy. On Wednesday, Trump stated that the 60-day truce outlined in the Memorandum of Understanding has ended. Although I would like to remind you that when this memorandum was signed, Trump said that this period was akin to a surrender. He said that when Iran signed this memorandum, it surrendered in the war. And so, as you can see, from surrender to closure, or as Trump says, the end of the memorandum, how much time has passed? 3 weeks? Well, a little more than 3 weeks. And after that, as you remember, the US began a second round of strikes near the Strait of Hormuz, including, for the first time in several months, attacks on infrastructure facilities inside Iran, which is a clear escalation. Iran responded with an attack on American bases in the region, and after that, Trump made it clear that the US was ready for de-escalation. On the other hand, Iran's chief negotiator Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf accused the US of intimidation and breaking promises, and warned that the Strait of Hormuz would be open only on Tehran's terms. Here is his quote, "If you strike, you will be struck in return." The Strait of Hormuz will only be open through agreements with Iran, not American threats. It is obvious that for Iran, maintaining control over the strait has become a key goal in any ceasefire agreement. This issue was a key provision in the Memorandum of Understanding between the US and Iran, and conflicting interpretations of the provisions concerning the strait are now causing the deal to fall apart. This is what we talked about yesterday. I won't repeat myself here. Yesterday I laid everything out clearly, including what the disagreements were about. The Memorandum of Understanding obliges Iran to ensure the safe passage of ships through the Strait of Hormuz, but soon after it was signed, Iranian officials accused the US of violating the agreement. Why? Because the Americans began directing ships out of the Persian Gulf along the southern route of the Strait of Hormuz near the coast of Oman without Tehran's approval, and Tehran thought that from now on, ships would only travel along its coastline. Now, the White House says that since most of the tankers that were stuck in the Persian Gulf have basically already left, the US military is ready to resume the war. This eased concerns within the Trump administration that resuming the conflict would immediately cause a sharp spike in oil prices. To be honest, Iran felt that its position in the Strait of Hormuz was weakening, since hundreds of ships are passing along the southern route near the coast of Oman, and Tehran can't do anything about it. In addition, despite the lifting of US sanctions, Iran was having trouble selling oil because financial institutions were not approving deals, and many countries were reluctant to rely on temporary exemptions from the sanctions. Basically, the sanctions were lifted, but many started turning away and saying, well, we're not really ready to cooperate with Iran yet because later we might get in trouble for working with them. Iran's frozen assets were not unfrozen because Iran had not yet taken the nuclear steps outlined in the agreement. Moreover, while the truce lasted, according to officials, the framework agreement brokered by the US between Israel and Lebanon made the Lebanese part of the Memorandum of Understanding with Iran unnecessary. As a result, the military wing of the regime in Tehran felt that they had been completely deceived, that they had simply been betrayed, as they put it. As a result, U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance stated that the U.S. position is very simple. The Hormuz Strait must remain open, and if not, the Americans are ready to bomb Iran indefinitely. Here is a quote from Vance. If they try to close it, the American military will fight back. They can either follow this plan, or the same thing that happened to them last night could happen to them again. This will continue until they open that corridor and stop firing at the ships. But it's also important to remember that unless some unconventional plan appears that no one has even thought of, Trump doesn't have that many options, and those might not work. And right now, the whole situation looks like, that famous visual illusion known as the Penrose staircase. That's the staircase that goes up and down endlessly, but always ends up in the same place. Right now, the situation with the northern Hormuz Strait and Trump's overall war against Iran reminds me of that Penrose staircase visual illusion. So it's always going in circles, up and down, up and down, up and down, around and around, but it always comes back to the same point. That's it. So this is exactly the same situation right now. In fact, Trump could now give the order for a large-scale escalation. He could consider the possibility of airstrikes on Iran's civilian infrastructure or power plants, or an invasion of the coastal areas along the Strait of Hormuz to push back Iranian forces. Another option is an operation to seize Iran's oil hub on Kark Island, but the costs could be enormous, and they could trigger an economic downturn that he tried to avoid by signing the Memorandum of Understanding. That the storming of Kark Island by the Marines or Special Forces could result in huge losses among American servicemen. Expanding the list of targets in Iran leads to retaliatory attacks on U.S. allies in the Persian Gulf and American regional bases. And again, just like in the first phase of the war, it is quite likely now that Iran will start firing at oil and gas facilities, which could trigger a global energy crisis, something Trump does not want. On the other hand, it is unclear whether even a full-scale war could destroy Iran's ability to threaten the Strait of Hormuz. Considering that literally just a few drones can stop commercial shipping and they can be launched from locations many kilometers away from the port. That is, of course, you can clear Iran's coastal zone, but that doesn't change the fact that drones can still be launched from far away and once again paralyze the Strait of Hormuz. And in this situation, retired American Admiral James Stavridis came up with a plan today that it would seem has long been obvious. Here is the quote. Honestly, I don't think we could capture Kark Island, but we could block it. That would be the end. The Iranian military. In response, Iran may take tough measures, but perhaps economic pressure on Iran will make the regime consider whether it can endure the political consequences of a ruined economy indefinitely. But regardless, the US has already begun redeploying its military refueling aircraft back to the Middle East, which had been temporarily moved to Europe the previous week. For its part, the Israel Defense Forces are also on high alert for a possible large-scale escalation. The Chief of the General Staff of Israel has held a series of emergency meetings over the past 24 hours with the leadership of military intelligence, the Air Force, and Operational Command, and has also maintained continuous direct coordination with the U.S. Central Command, the Department of Defense in Washington. So once again, we find ourselves at a crossroads, either war or negotiations again, or both at the same time. I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below this episode. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. That's all for now. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye, everyone.